Water Quality Management Committee will come to order. Agenda item number 1, baseline monitoring discussion with Brian House. The town meeting in the famous Article 17 voted to order us essentially to establish a baseline data and monitoring of impact of demonstration projects in the water bodies that we're studying, and I believe we're also talking about West Falmouth as well. So we've had a few backing and forthings on this, but all conversations seem to lead back to Brian House. So he's here tonight to tell us as much as he can and as much as we can get out of him about baseline monitoring in Falmouth.
And what I did was I didn't prepare a talk because I know that you really want Q&A stuff, but I thought that I'd lay out just a couple of things based on what I knew that you might be interested in. And then I threw in a bunch of maps at the end because somebody had said at one point that wanted to see stations or something. So, but we don't have to get to this. There's no presentation of this. It's like a handful of slides at the beginning to kick things off. And I try to put it in two things. One is we talk about baseline monitoring. When I talk about compliance monitoring, obviously, compliance monitoring is after you have a TMDL and you're trying to prove that you met the TMDL. That's really what compliance monitoring is. It's sort of like when you have a wastewater treatment facility and you have to do daily samples, you report those out. It's a regulatory process. And the rigor at which you do things is different for collecting a sample in a regulatory environment than it is in a research environment or applied or basic research environment. It's very different. And reporting is different. So what we as at the university, we've set up an environmental services center specifically to try to give turnkey operations for the towns, sort of like what, in many ways, the county does for water and wastewater. This is natural waters. And the idea is that we have set procedures, and the reporting procedures would have to go to DEP as well as the town, so you know where you were. And then periodically, then you would do a synthesis. And the reason that you periodically have to do synthesis is that there's variability in the system. And the big problem with baseline monitoring, this goes to everything we talk about. There's variability in the water quality data. We know it, we've seen it, you see it in all the reports we've done for Falmouth. And what you have to do is you have to have enough data to be able to separate out your new signal, your lower, better condition signal from your not so good present signal. And so you may be thinking, well, I'm doing more than I really want to do, but in reality, when you need to know, you'll have it and you'll be able to make those statements as quick as you can, because the true cost is not the monitoring going in to an alternative or to a fix. The true cost is trying to eliminate phase 4 or phase 5 of your implementation, your correction problem. These things are going to take decades to do, and our hope, and it came out in our discussions too, and it came out actually in the Barnstable County Review that we went with all those with the peer reviewers, that our push is to try to eliminate those later phases, and then what would you have to do it? They came out as adaptive management as a buzzword, but that's what it really is. Now, sometimes it can work against you too, of course. I mean, if you do something that doesn't work. But I'm not thinking for Falmouth systems, the way they're set up, that that's going to happen. I think there's some big systems in the region where we could worry about that. These are not those. So I'm going to talk about that. And then at the end, really, I can't talk much about the quantification of the effectiveness of nitrogen management alternatives, like PRBs and things like that, until we have a specific example. I could talk in general, but if you have a specific example, then we can say, well, in that example, on that site, this is what you would do. That's more of an experimental kind of approach, where you'd say, we're going to put this in, what would you have to, Mashpee, we're going to put oysters in here, what would you have to do to prove that they're working? And so you have to say, okay, where are you going to put them, how many are you going to put there, and then we'll see if we can measure that impact. Okay. So I broke it up into sort of the monitoring programs and then the other stuff. The monitoring programs, we all know this. The goals of all the monitoring programs are around really to assess the current nutrient-related water quality of an estuary. And also then to track short and long-term changes in that water quality and other features. Those two, though, fit together a different way. It comes down into people always say, well, don't we have enough now? And the answer is that, well, things are still
Yeah.
changing in the watershed. If we hadn't done certain measurements that we've done in various estuaries that we're currently monitoring, we would not have known things that conditions had changed. That either changed because of an inlet widening, some activity, there's some restorations going on, wetland restorations going on all the time. When we were doing the MWRA monitoring, what we found was that, hey, it's really great we did this monitoring because we hadn't done the monitoring, but then everybody would be blaming that horrible event on the pipe when in fact it can't even possibly be related to it. So there's reasons to do it. The other reason to do it is, as we get more data, there's always the possibility, not of changing the TMDL, but of refining the models that went into the TMDL and then saying, with all this new data, we have this new stuff. We can quickly update that. We've already done 5, 6 updates already. We're doing 3 this summer, or this year rather, where new information has come in very complex systems, and we're refining the reports, and that can happen for you too. But you have to have this data. It wouldn't be part of this. It's something you have to think about why you do it. And the other one is the site-specific validation, which you guys are up to here in, and we can talk about. But also it's to confirm the TMDL compliance. Did you make it? And the TMDL compliance fits 2 ways. Depending on who you talk to within this arena, all knowledgeable people, all right, everybody with their own opinion. One approach is to say, well, if you match the TMDL load that's in the TMDL, so you got your load down to this amount, then that's one level of compliance. But that would require that you did all of your implementation, and you waited for it all to come to balance when our great-grandchildren are retiring, and that happens. Because it's going to take a long time after we get everything done for it to come to that last 5% or 10%. It's going to get great really fast, but then it's going to take a long time to flatten out. Fine. The trick then is to try to come up with ways to do those projections as to, is it good enough now? Are we going to make it? Do we really have to build phase 5? And the reason I say this, I'm involved in a lot of those programs where there is a phase 5 or phase 4, and they're big. I mean, frequently, you know, it could be 50 million, all the way out to the last 50 million. So we're talking about cutting out the final 50 million. And it's adapting how we do things. And Virginia, you probably, I mean, when we started doing the base cleanup work, that they were able to eliminate things as they went along.
You get a chair.
So it's that kind of approach. All right, in terms of regional water quality monitoring, these are programs around the area. All of these programs were established by SMAST or SMAST staff. Right now, we're not doing the analytical work for Buzzards Bay. We're doing, but we set it up in '92 and we ran it up to 2010 or 8 or something like that. All of these are set up. Now, the reason I say that is I could say, geez, I look at this map at night and I say I can retire now. Or you look at it and say, so therefore, getting a consistent monitoring approach not only allows you to look at your individual system you're interested in, but to know that it's comparable. It's a comparable analytical scheme, sampling scheme to all of the other systems in the region. And that's really important when you're talking about then arguing things. Plus, things can happen. It's happened in very large national programs, and this consistency would allow easy adjustments. Plus, all of these programs, all of this data prior to 2010, 2011 went into all the MEP analyses so that it's totally consistent with your TMDL analysis. It's a big picture. It's a little picture. In fact, it's a little pond picture. And this is Little Pond. I know there's a lot of discussion with you guys about Little Pond because of Article 17. Quick learner. It's not like Hangar 51, is it? But in any case, and these are the traditional stations that were set up in 1987 for Little Pond. Okay?
87 or 97?
87.
87.
We did not use data all the way back to 87 because part of what happens is things change over time, and holding you to what happened in 87 and pulling that in with 2004 skews the data in a way that, you know, is improper. So the reason 97 to 2004 was done was because when the report was coming out, like 2005, and because that data best matched what we thought was the load from the land use data that we were modeling at the time. So if we were to do this again today, we would build it out to 2010 or 2011 and redo it. And we might still include 97 because not much has happened in this watershed to contribute new loads. But we would have to do a time trend analysis to make sure that we're not biasing things by having a high or a low number in those early years. It's trending up or trending down.
Do you have information from 2005 till now?
Yes.
Okay, so you have a continuum for back till 87?
Yeah, it hasn't been processed because there hasn't been a reason to do it, and we've been doing it because this is the oldest running volunteer program for nutrient management in the country right now. And we're nostalgic.
Is
And we don't have any money either, so we haven't been able to process the data.
your data every year, several times a year? About 4 times a year, okay.
Yeah,
And it's the same 2 months, the same 4 times, the same stations that we've done since 1987. And we have done annual sampling as well. Sorry.
Could you describe it in detail? Who does it? When do they do it? What happens to the sample? How often?
It's a pond watch program that we've been sort of doing on the cuff. And what we did was we kept it going because Falmouth has, so many estuaries, and there's certain, you needed data coming in, and there was so much stuff flying around, we just kept it going the best we could. And as we did the reports, then we could work the data up and process them through the MEP. That's how we did it. The analysis is paid for from 2005 to present by the university.
By the university.
Really, it's the volunteers at the university. Nobody's paid. Right? But what we have is we have the same cadre. We set up a protocol in '87 for NOAA. So it was checked through NOAA, and it was since through EPA. This is actually won a variety of awards, national awards, for how to do estuarine monitoring, how to train people. And the protocols we use of training people, of the quality assurance plan, and things like that we have set up for this is the same one that became then for Buzzards Bay and all of the other systems in the region. I mean, this was the first one. Buzzards Bay started in '92, this started in '87. As part of a town project in '87 with NOAA Sea Grant money. And basically the challenge was, can you have volunteers or town staff do things and still come up with research quality data? And now what we're doing is, I think after almost 30 years, we've convinced most of the regulatory agencies that with the proper QA checks, proper lab, and the proper oversampling, which is a critical piece, that the data can be used. You can't. One of the problems we had in the Buzzards Bay program when we set it up was that we didn't set it up alone. We set up with the Buzzards Bay Project, the Buzzards Bay Coalition with Buzzards Bay. But one of the problems there was there's 28 estuaries. It's a massive startup, and not all of them have, all of these you'll see have a lot of stations in them for this size. There's a high data density, and a lot of those don't have that data density. Okay. It just was cost prohibitive. They've continued them and slowly expanded them, even up to now. They're still expanding as they can. So what will happen is we did annual sampling in these systems, and what we found is that the sort of annual variability was equal to sort of the variability we're getting in summertime samples. Meaning that if you take 4 samples in the summer, you take samples quarterly, and you average and look at the deviation, you're getting about the same variation. And because there's a lot of variation in the summer, is the reason. Blooms, things like that. And Virginia, you asked me that question in '89 or something like that, right? So that was a long time ago. But it's stuck in my mind. That's a critical point, is what's the variability? Do you have to do year-round sampling? The answer is, in my recommendation, it's only my opinion, it's worth what you pay for it, and nothing. So the answer is, I wouldn't do year-round sampling because the TMDL is not based on year-round sampling. TMDL is based on summer sampling. There's a reason for that. It's the critical period for these estuaries. That's when things go south. You know it's when they go south in oxygen. You know when things get bad with the infauna. It's when the algal blooms occur. So the program focused on, if we could restore the bad conditions in the summer than conditions in the winter, which are already pretty good, would still be pretty good. And that's true. I mean, that's a estuarine truism. So you lose a lot of cost that way. You don't have to do a lot of things you might think you have to do. Now, we have done annual sampling, and just to make sure, because part of this new thing that you don't have to do it year-round started 30 years ago, we're trying to prove it to people you didn't have to do things year-round. So most programs don't.
Brian,
Yeah.
just fill me in here, because if I go to one of these stations,
Mm-hmm.
and you take a sample,
LP2, right in the middle.
LP2, do you take a sample from the bottom, from the middle, and from the top?
No, depending on the depth of the system, like Little Pond, you just do surface and bottom.
Surface and bottom. And you then measure Oxygen, nitrogen, total
What
nitrogen?
you do, in the assays that we would do is we always do oxygen.
Yeah,
If you do oxygen, you have to do temperature and salinity.
Yeah.
So we do temperature and salinity.
yeah,
And this is a minimalistic program. We can squeeze a lot of data out of a few measurements. We do the nitrogen series, which is the oxidized forms of nitrate and nitrate as one, because there's
Yeah.
hardly any nitrate. But you still want to get it, so you can run that as a single assay. We do ammonium, which is the other inorganic form. By having the two inorganic forms, we get a lot of power out of our analysis. We also then do the organic forms, which are the dissolved organic and the particulate organic. And part of the reason we do that is, this hasn't happened yet in the Eastern community, but we've been driving this for decades now, that doing total nitrogen may not be the most effective way to do nitrogen modeling. And so we're pushing in a better direction to get better sensitivity in our models. And by having those four species, we can do that. By having orthophosphate, then we can talk about nitrogen limitation, because meaning you can determine if nitrogen really is limiting. In other words, it really is the problem, and we do a full analysis for every one of the esters to make sure before we say, hey, you got to fix nitrogen, that really, if you add more nitrogen, you're going to have things are going to get worse, and if you take nitrogen away, things are going to get better. So we have to do that analysis first. All of these are clearly nitrogen-sensitive systems. Okay. And then we look at, and we don't have to, it's sort of an optional that we do, is we look at chlorophyll A and its initial breakdown product, K-phytin A, because that gives you a good idea of phytoplankton biomass, and it gives you some information. There's value to shellfish, understanding. There's value to turbidity. We also do just a simple SECI measurement for transparency. You have to do total depth. There's a few other little things you have to do, but there's a specific sequence too. It isn't just go out and do it. And the big problem in life with meters and with chemistry is you always get a number. And the problem is if it's not, the protocols are not done properly, and the people are not trying properly, that means doing the sampling in the right order even, then you will get a number, and it's going to be a bad number, and you're going to base your planning. So that's it. It's not just go to it.
Steve?
Brian, two questions. First one, I understand what you're saying about the summer sampling, that makes sense. Is that acceptable to the regulatory bodies for the compliance sampling? That you
Yes.
just sample in the summer?
Absolutely.
And
In these systems, may not, it isn't for NWA maybe,
Right.
because it's a totally different world up there with spring blooms and mixing.
We're only interested in
and for
But-
something like, this may be jumping ahead, and you can defer it if you want. Something like one of our demonstration projects, PRBs or shellfish or something like that. Can you gain by also sampling other parts of the year? In other words, how many years after such a thing was installed would you have a statistically significant answer as to how well it was working?
If I was going to put, say, a shellfish between LP1, which is this one, and LP2, which is I just seed them in there. I just made it up, okay? I'm not saying you should do that. But if you did that, you want to know the effect, I would still put in more stations in there between them. I wouldn't just look it up and down. I would make sure that we had our hydrodynamic model, so we'd be making measurements for that. And I would focus mainly on the summer still. I might start early, I might start in May, and I might go to September, which is really the summer. But I would not just rely, I'd increase the number of stations, I would increase the number of sampling times, right? Rather than 4 times, I might sample it 20 times. Because to get that statistical rigor, you need sometimes to have the additional numbers. It's not a question of how many years, it's well, how many samples do you want to collect, and then how many years, right? You need at least 3 years to really demonstrate a baseline trend. But to demonstrate the effectiveness of a treatment system, like oysters or whatever, PRBs, you don't need any time at all. You just have to know that the treatment that you're putting in is impinging upon the bay. You should start seeing an effect the second it starts impinging on the bay if you design your sampling program properly. And then you might need 2 or 3 years to have it come to full balanced equilibrium. But you're not going to have to wait 3 years to start your sampling. You're going to get a big jump, big drop. If it has an effect, you're going to see a lot of it right away, and then less and less. And the less and less over time is the depuration and equilibrium of the sediments re-equilibrating. So that's the thing that takes time. But I mean, think about it. If you open an inlet you widen it. Or just there isn't one, then you open it, like Russian Marsh. You open it. You will begin to see the impact on the water quality within a week or day. We have some 3 days. And then you'll start to see effects on the infauna within a year, depending on what time of year you open it, because the larvae only set at certain times and things like that. So, you know, you can design. You have to design your program around the time of year, the scale of the alternative you're testing, and what you're really trying to find. But it's not. This isn't a 10-year program. You put in once again. Put in a PRB, once the PRB is fully impinging upon, its effect is impinging upon the bay, then you'll see stuff really fast. Like an inlet, open it, there it is. If you put in oysters, you're going to start to see it really pretty quick. And then it'll diminish until it comes to equilibrium. And that'll be quick too.
The rate of change.
Rate of change, well, it will come to the system will re-equilibrate relatively quickly. And that way I don't have to think about rates. But yeah, you're right.
I'm just wondering, when you take measurements at the surface and the bottom, the concentration likely isn't linear going down. How do you interpret the nitrogen in the whole water column, so to speak?
If you remember, what I said was that in these systems, with the depth of these systems, surface and bottom is sufficient. It does not mean in all systems it's sufficient. We have systems we have to take 16 depths. Okay? So, and the reason we have to take 16 depths is they're stratified, and there are zones that you get rapid rates of change, and things change, and you want to get a good refinement, that's what you do. In these systems, for the most part, don't stratify. Or if they stratify, they stratify. They don't mix. They mix all the time is what I mean. They don't go unmixed. And if they do not mix for a little bit, then it tends to only be very short days, hours. It's not weeks. And so you can see a change in oxygen a lot quicker than you can see a change in the nutrient concentration. So what happens is you get a nutrient field that's relatively constant, but because it's not mixing, the oxygen goes away in hours to overnight.
That's usually what happens after a heavy rainstorm in the summer.
Yeah.
And stratification.
It's right. What I should tell you guys is, to your estuaries here, we just finished a huge study on regional forcing of oxygen, where we used a ton of Falmouth estuaries as well as estuaries out the region to answer the question, when oxygen goes away, why does it go away everywhere in the same day? And what we found is in 23 estuaries in the region, all of them hit their oxygen minimum within a day or two of each other. And it's because of regional forcing. It's meteorological. It's light, but it's meteorological storms. It's associated with storms, but it's not necessarily the rain part, but that's it. We also have a lot of macroalgal mapping going on here, which is another impact. We have people doing video mapping of not all the estuaries, but a lot of them as well as the infauna work. So we have a lot of other data being collected and actually coming out now in the next 6 months or so into the reviewed literature. So, okay, but let's get back to your point.
Yeah, Brian.
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
No, just one observation. A number of years ago, I did a study of a 1 meter deep, I think it was 1 meter deep pond, and it had a steady nutrient inflow going into it. And what happened was that the phytoplankton bloomed, and then it reached like a maximum concentration in terms of the number of photons coming in. It started to senesce, flocculated, and settled to the bottom. And then the transparency improved, and the oxygen at the bottom was actually higher than the surface, and everything was inverted. It was a biological inversion.
No, I mean,
I'm just wondering if some of that fickleness that you were talking about in the summer, like you're getting, that maybe there are these patterns of blooms and crashes, and you know.
Certainly it's possible in certain areas, and certainly it's possible that answers some of the problem. But large bloom systems like that in this region are not what's driving things. And I say that just based on the decades and decades of looking at. We're interested in vertical stratification. We're interested in short-term stratification. We had moorings out there to measure small-scale stratification because it's always a problem. You know, you hang a string of sensors and you say, well, you know, do we really have to worry about this? Can we model these systems, or are we going to stick everybody? So we have to answer that. And some of these, if people are interested in doing baseline monitoring, we can hang strings on some of the mooring lines, and they're, you know, it's cheapo depot, and we just do it, you know.
I mean, as I recall, when you got 1 gram of nitrogen per cubic meter, you hit the limit, and then it would
Well, you know what the good news is? The good news is that's why you need to have a lot of data, because then those things start flying out of the system. They start jumping out at you as this is different. And a lot of times, if you have 100 data points and 1 or 2 of them are 3 times the standard deviation of the average, then you start looking to see what's wrong with those 3 points. And that is also acceptable, as long as you can justify it statistically and ecologically. Our bigger problem, by the way, is the sampler hitting the bottom with a pole.
Strictly practical questions. How many volunteers do you have in Falmouth? Do they have boats? How do they get to
All of our
make their
sites,
samples?
and this is, I mean, we set this up the way it should be run, and all of our sites are sampled by boat. All of the sites and everything except for the Buzzards Bay estuaries are sampled by boat.
Okay, I was just noticing in your request for volunteers, you said they didn't have to have a boat.
Because you put 2
Do you
people in a boat.
provide the boat?
And so if everybody had a boat, then we'd only have 1 person in the boat. So we have 2 people in a boat. So no, not everybody has to have a boat, because they can get in a boat with somebody else.
Okay, but the volunteer's boat is the boat,
The law is, thou will sample from a boat,
and the
or
volunteer
the belly of a whale.
provides the boat. You don't provide the boat?
No,
Okay.
this whole thing has to be done when we set this up, and all the other programs have copied it, has to be done in a way that keeps the costs excruciatingly low for the communities. I mean, we do, I'll show you a picture at the end of your time.
I'm trying to figure out if
Yeah.
it's one of the volunteers' boat to find out if he can get a boat to use.
Neither one.
Oh, he's trying to get a boat out of us? Is that
Neither one. I'm strictly interested in the practical aspects of how you get these samples and who gets them and what happens to them after you've collected them.
what we do is
Let's get into the
we-
practicality here.
We've set up 30 or 40 of these programs. They're all the same. And you set them up so that you have somebody has to be in charge. When we have somebody in charge, in this case at Falmouth, it's always been, first it was a Hui person, now it's an SBAS person. It's been Dale. It's always been Dale. It's Dale now. And that person's in charge of making sure that people are trained, making sure that all the equipment, there's a lot of logistics going on here. You gotta the bottles have to be prepared for analytical analysis. Everything has to go in the right places, the coolers, the ice chests, so the holding times are set, so that the samples are handled properly, all that. But that's something, I mean, that training session takes a couple hours, and I can be more than happy to sit you down, Eric, over a cup of coffee.
You can summarize it.
Through that. I just did. So, but then the next piece is that then at a pre-appointed time, because it's important what time of day and what time of tide you sample, that's a fundamental piece. Then the sampling has to occur. And all the ponds that we sample in Falmouth, say, are sampled within a very narrow window of time on the same day. All the estuaries in Mashpee, for instance, something like 35 stations, are all sampled within a 2 or 3 hour period on the same days, okay, at 5 in the morning.
As much as possible, you're trying to get a snapshot in time.
Because you get what you get. It's not so much, you could do the estuaries on different days to some extent if you didn't want to compare one to the other so much. The critical thing is each estuary has to be done at once, because the gradients move in the estuaries. And so, and a lot of programs have really, early on in this process, really blew it, because they just sampled at the same time of day. So that means on the first day they sampled at mid-tide, and 2 days later they sampled at low tide, and a couple of days later they sampled at high tide. And of course, the difference at high tide and low tide can be very, very large in terms of concentration, depending on where you're in the estuary. Estuary like Oyster Pond, no. But in other estuaries, yes. So you have to know all that stuff going in. You set the program for the estuary. You set the sampling density in space and time, depending on what you want to prove. Baseline monitoring, for something where you're taking time to do things, 4 times a year is plenty. Our experience has shown that. You don't want too much, but you don't want it to go away either, because then you lose a lot of power in trying to adapt things as you go along, and also you don't want to have to reset up things, knock them down, reset them. That's the biggest pain. In other words, it's sort of like momentum. Once it's rolling, it keeps rolling. If it stops, it's impossible to get going again. Yeah.
If you do them all at, say, low tide, or all, let's say, high tide, or whatever, is that the worst case for all the estuaries?
No, we do it at mid-tide because that's typically close to the average. It isn't the average. We just did a huge statistical analysis, and it's not. It actually overestimates the nitrogen concentration. The TMDLs are typically set based on the modeled tidal average, because that's lower. I mean, that's a good number for you to have, because it means the numbers that are out there are lower than you would get directly out of a monitoring program. So the system, it's more accurate. If you took just the straight monitoring number, you'd be doing more infrastructure. So by doing this, you're doing less infrastructure. That's a good thing. So you wouldn't, if you went, high tide is typically the worst. Low tide is the best. Oh, wait a minute. High tide is the best, low tide is the worst.
And the regulatory agencies don't require us to do the work.
No. The regulatory agencies require that you meet the TMDL. The TMDL is based on the tidally average number. And if we get these numbers and we get the water quality data and we put it into the modeling thing, then we can come up with a tidally average number and we're done.
Virginia.
So what I've just heard you say is that 4 times a year in every one of these south-facing estuaries, you have collected this same suite of samples for these analyses, but you haven't processed them?
We haven't processed them up, no, because we're doing it on the cuff. And what we do is we collect data. No, listen, we collect data. I'm sorry, Virginia, but you know me. I apologize, but can I finish?
Well, I'm not criticizing, but when
I didn't take it that way. I wanted to explain it.
Okay.
That when you're doing it on the cuff, you process it, but you don't process it through all the QA and everything. You don't tabulate it. You don't make it into some nice, neat thing.
Okay.
Because you're already in the hole. But what you do is you wait for a project like the MEP, or in the case of Mashpee, or in the case of a bridge opening, or somebody wants a permit and they call us up. We say we have this data, so we build in a little bit of money to process that all through, and then we move it down the road, and that's how we keep costs low down.
Okay. So I think we're happy to hear that the data collection didn't stop in 2005 when the MEP came out and the TMDL was set. You have 2006 and so on, all the way up to the present.
We foresaw, even in our earliest talks, you'll see at the bottom that always says monitoring, starts with monitoring and ends with monitoring.
I just want to parse a word here if I can. It sounds like you've got sample collection since that time and some data. Because you're saying you actually run the analysis when you can.
You have to run the analyses because you don't run the analyses, they expire, their holding time expires.
So you do actually run,
We have to keep into the protocols that will allow us to use the data in the end.
Gotcha.
Right, but the data hasn't been analyzed. So from our point of view, we were saying we need some baseline data as to what it's like now, and the data was 2005 was really old. Well, the answer is the data is there, but it hasn't been analyzed.
Yeah, and I will tell you that there's a possibility. I'll have to look to see if Falmouth Harbor dropped off the list. That would be the only one that might have dropped off the list.
Okay, so we clearly would want that data analyzed now for these south-facing estuaries, because we're looking at all these various projects for these.
Well, and then you
various
also
areas.
want to report on it, you want to see the trends, you want to, yeah.
Okay, so my next question was, if I've heard you correctly, once we start doing some sort of demonstration in some particular area, we may need to have either more frequent sampling or more stations or both.
Yeah, you keep the old
in that
ones.
particular area.
Keep the old ones.
Keep the
and
old
you add
ones.
to them, and you
Yeah.
keep this old sampling times, and you add to them. And it's so fundamental that you look at this little pond, that's the sentinel station for Little Pond. Okay, so that, you say, well, why don't we just measure that one? Well, the big problem that we had is that happened in Pleasant Bay. And now everybody's up in arms, and has been for the last couple of years, because something has happened in Pleasant Bay, and they don't have enough samples in the right places to be able to determine it.
Right.
If those samples were selected specifically to allow the modeling to occur, not just to assess the estuarine health, they feed directly, and by having them in the same place and they were well positioned, then we can take this data and seamlessly update the water quality model. So if things get better, we can seamlessly recalibrate, revalidate, and say, hey, things are different now, and this is now the new load you would need to, the next level of load you need to.
Okay, so pursuing my line of thinking, since you have the data, I think we would want to have some sense of what it would cost to have the analysis done for the coastal ponds on the south side. And then, so that's sort of task one. And then we need to decide for task two whether this summer 2012 has the same kind of sampling it always has, or whether, because we're looking at shellfish activities in Little Pond, we want to bump up the program to something somewhat more intense.
I think that's a very specific question in terms of take the structure of what you have, so that's sort of lumping along.
Yep.
And then you see, well, once you have this structure, then can we add a couple of things in? What would we have to do that?
Right.
And what other forces would you bring to bear to do that?
Right.
And then in addition to that, are there any research interests that we could get things done for free? And that's how we work.
Okay.
And so there's always that possibility as well. But the critical piece is, once you have the structure, then you can get the unforeseen event and you can build it up for the foreseen events. And, it's an experiment. I mean, you know all about experiments.
Yeah.
And so we're going to do something, you really need to design your sampling program around that, but you don't have to sample it for 10 years.
So that leads to my next practical question, and that is, if we do want to have more than the basic structure for sampling for Little Pond, who do you think needs to be involved in setting up what that sampling program will be? Who needs to be in the room?
It depends on what types of measurements you need, you know what I mean? And then if you need to have, what you do is you'd set it up and you could have somebody else look at it to make sure that it makes sense. But I mean, it's essentially an experiment. And so if you're going to put in oysters, you need to have somebody who knows about oysters. Then you need to have the people that understand the geochemistry and the water quality analysis that be doing that. Then you have to have the people that are running the program that are really fundamental. Because if you don't have a good inner working relationship with the people that are running it, like we have in Mashpee, you can't get anything done, because things get moved. Changes get made right in the middle of analytical, I mean, it's all that stuff that we know about, but it happens. And so you need to have sort of that group, then the people that really just know about shellfish themselves group, and then the people that are going to do the assay group. And then, because what you want to know, and I've said it 1,000 times, so I know what you want to know too, because you guys have told me, is that it's not just that we know we lowered the nitrogen, it's how much can we prove so we can get credit for that towards our TMDL. And everything we do is aimed at that number.
Right.
It doesn't matter what you think you got. You got to get a sign off from the regulatory agencies, we will credit you this much. And then you put that in your plan, and you move to the next thing you're going to do.
Okay.
One more thing here on compliance monitoring. When we go to compliance monitoring, this is sort of an option. One of the things we do is that if Little Pond is restored, one of the first things we're going to see is the dissolved auction that we've done out there. We've done a lot of auction work out there. We put in recorders and we get this type of data where it's continuous records.
What's the time period there? What's that
That's
time
a month.
Huh?
That's a month or so.
That's a month.
Yeah.
So we're looking at up and down days.
Yeah, and this is zero down here. The red line is stress, and the blue line is auction. This is right out of the Little Pond report. I mean, it's right in the MEP report. But the critical piece is it's highly variable, and what it says to you is a couple things. One, the top one says, hey, we got a problem. That's obvious. The second thing it says, though, is you got to be really careful if you're doing 4 times a year and measuring oxygen and thinking you're really getting things. So if you really have done something and you're getting out there in time, 10 years, and you're thinking, we think we're there now, then for $1,000, $1,500, whatever, then we can get a couple of these things put in, or 1 in, 2 in, $2,000-$3,000, and run through, and then we can really capture that temporal variability to prove, in addition to the monitoring program, which over many years, like 10 samples, 4 times a year, 40 samples, you're going to pick up low oxygen with that. That's a big enough N, but not if you have a trend. So you do this just once or twice over a long period of time to say, hey, we made it. Until you've done something, it's not worth doing it. I put it in there because I've done the extreme now. On the one hand, the water quality stuff I think you should do. This, I don't. I think this should be very big periodic.
Brian? But you're saying the nitrogen does not have that kind of day-to-day variation?
No.
Because they respond to very, very different forcing functions. Oxygen is mainly driven in these systems by the ultimate cause, which is too much nitrogen, too much organic matter. Whether it's living or dead organic matter, it doesn't matter so much. And the nitrogen is driven by just the load in. So it's end of flushing. The other thing, though, that is something you should be looking at at some frequency is the animal habitat. And the reason, this is just stations we have in Little Pond, that's all I really want you to see. So a lot of stations
Specifically for habitat?
just for benthic animal communities.
Okay.
When were they there and how long?
Oh, this is captured in November of some year just before we did the report.
So 2004, 3?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Steve?
But there's no need to do it again until you think, I mean, you could do it now. That it's been long enough. But, you know, this is something that you do periodically because. The other thing is, which goes on, is the eelgrass. Now, eelgrass, these are the two.
Just come back, because you did that, maybe I completely missed the point. Come back a slide.
Well, I'm not even close to being done talking about infauna, so.
But
Well,
you started off by talking about, I think you went off, we're talking now about where one would go if one was going to develop a compliance monitoring
These are other
program.
types of compliance monitoring to say that you
So-
made it to where you want to
This is a
go.
possible parameter for compliance monitoring.
These are the two parameters that the TMDL is based on.
Okay,
They're not
that's-
possible.
okay.
If I was going to do habitat, rather than play around with other things, you might want to say, I'm going to build into my compliance plan a revisitation at some long interval of these critical parameters. I'll explain why in a second.
Okay, I got it now.
Okay.
How do you know the error bar on the species population? As
Well, we have-
opposed to everything
we-
else, you implied that there was just a single sample far apart in years.
I'll explain that in just a second. Let me finish the eelgrass. It seems to be sticking in my head for some reason. This is the eelgrass mapping program from DEP that the trend analysis is based on. We have other data other than this, but this is, for this tonight, this is fine. And so what had happened was that for Little Pond, they said, hey, eelgrass is going away. And the infauna has very low numbers of species, 3, 6, 7. Now, these are all these stations with dupes. It's broken into sections because you have to have variability within sections. And we're just not getting anywhere near what you should be seeing 20, 25 species. You should be saying, well, these numbers aren't so bad. Numbers 500 or so. We just finished an analysis, just so you know, that we don't, of 600 sites and estuaries in the region to come up and get the relationship between the number of species, the number of infauna, and what types of communities there are versus the total nitrogen concentration, the oxygen concentration, the organic matter concentration in those sites. And the averages of those total nitrogen concentrations were 10-year monitoring averages. So we get the variability that way. We compare to these. We get a fantastic relationships that way. The point is when you look at a site, time is critical on these sites. If you sample in May, you will walk away with a lot of these sites saying, hey, they're great. Because everything's set in the winter, started to grow, you got fantastic species numbers and great composition, you know. The animals that live there tell you what type of environment is. So if you have a lot of tubophysids and capitals, little ligid worms, not so good. You have cohogs and bay scallops, good. And so they tell you about it, not just the numbers, but the species that are there. The species themselves are long-lived if they're good. So they can't grow in a year. You live for several years. So you get a lot of information out of looking what's there, but you can't look once, you're right. And so that's what I'm saying, but you don't have to look every year either.
Thank you.
And it's part of it's a life cycle of the animals themselves. So I'm not going to go through this. I just want to say for Little Pond, these are the things that go in the that make the TMDL targets. It's the oxygen levels, the chlorophyll levels, the macroalgae, eelgrass, and infaunal animals. That's the habitat indicators. So what we did is we picked out the ones that are critical, the eelgrass and infauna, which are the ones that are driving your estuarine restoration. If eelgrass comes back, then the water's going to be clear. All these other great things are going to happen. There's going to be high oxygen, blah, blah, blah. Animals will be good. So some areas didn't have eelgrass. Upper Little Pond never had eelgrass that we know of up in here. And so there's no target for up in there. The target up in there is that the benthic animal community has to be restored because the benthic animal community is impaired. It's a very, and I agree with DEP on this. I mean, you have estuaries, certain areas of them can support eelgrass. Eelgrass is more sensitive to nitrogen loading than in-fauna animals. So therefore, we want to target those sensitive areas for restoration, but you can't write off the other areas. The good news is the way we came up with the Sentinel Station is we found that if we position the Sentinel Station properly for eelgrass, that the benthic animal communities up in the upper estuary were also met their target. And that made us happy because it means, well, then maybe we're doing something right. Because if we set the wrong Sentinel Station, the wrong concentration for eelgrass, then it would blow off the in-fauna stuff. It all is one system, has to fit together, because at one time there were good animal communities up here and there's good eelgrass down here. Okay? Sort of an independent check. But the way you do this for compliance monitoring is we would recommend water quality monitoring annually. We talked about that. The number can go up and down. We start our programs at 8 times a summer, but maintenance is 4 times a summer. Dropping below 4 is really bad. Benthic animal habitat, we're talking usually around every 3 years, could be every 4 years, even every 5 years, depending on what you're doing, but that's kind of gives you the ballpark frequency. We're not talking every year, and it's not that expensive. It's actually will not be a big expense item. The routine monitoring tends to run things up a little bit. But we also came up for eelgrass. Now, the critical question that we get is well, the problem with eelgrass is unlike benthic animals, which spread in the tide, spread their larvae in the tide, a lot of them, not all of them, a lot of them. We get this very rapid colonization. Eelgrass, not so much. If you totally remove eelgrass from an estuary, sometimes it can be a long time before you can get the new either, so move vegetatively or the vegetative pieces or seeds in there, unless you do plantings, kind of thing. But then the thing is, planting costs a lot of money, and so you're going out there and you just do plantings. And so what we recommend is you rely on the mapping by Mass DEP, which is about every 5 years. It can be less, 4 years, 5 years. But we've also came out, we just had a student graduate, the paper's going to come out pretty soon, with a bioassay for eelgrass, which is a cheap bioassay where you can do this, assay it through the summer, and determine if the site is reaching, either it's still as impaired as it was, maybe partway back but it's not worth doing anything, or maybe we should do a little bit more to see maybe it would be worth planting. Because once eelgrass is back, you're done. Eelgrass is back. You go out there and find a magic eelgrass that'll grow in all your estuaries now, you're done. You can't, but if you could, it would be great.
We're working on it.
Yeah, everybody's looking for magic ways to get rid of the wastewater. What we really need to do is get magic eelgrass. So, but that's sort of the time periods. You got things for a year, thing for 3 years, thing for 3 to 5 years, and part of this kind of viewpoint, and some other things as well, missions of the university, came up with the idea of having these packages so a town can turn the key, and then the things get done on a schedule. They have to be sampled at the right time of year. You sample the nutrients in the summer. You sample the benthic habitat in November. You have to do the bioassay starting in like May, and then you got to feed, all that kind of stuff. And you make it a turnkey with reports to the town that then they go to the town with the idea that then the town can submit them to DP. It's a formal public document. Okay. And that's it.
I just wanted to make sure I'm clear. This compliance monitoring, this is your vision of what compliance monitoring is, or this is the DEP's?
Let's put it this way. I've been how long doing this with DEP? The DEP has 2 things. One, they can't afford to pay for compliance monitoring themselves, right? So there's 2 ways to look at it. One, this was what originally was presented to in Pleasant Bay 6 years ago. It's better now because we have better tools now. It's the same basic structure. And it was presented by everybody, at DEP as well. But right now, there's some uncertainty about what a compliance monitoring might look like in the long run. I will tell you that we have many towns that are already doing compliance monitoring, and it's because they see that they need to do it, and they're not doing yet because it hasn't been enough time for them to do the in-fauna and the eelgrass that's coming up on that. My other feeling is this is good compliance monitoring.
I'm going to paraphrase back to you. It's a recommendation, not yet yet a hard requirement.
It's
yet.
guidance.
It's a good guidance.
No, it's guidance, it's
good guidance.
not
Yeah, okay.
regulation. The problem that we have is that we can't.
It's evolving. It's still evolving.
We just
I
can't-
understand.
Yeah, but it's a regulatory process, you know, it takes a long time. It took us, what, 4 or 5 years to get the Cape Cod dredging time of year window guidance released.
Yeah.
And thousands of man hours, so.
If we asked them right now what they thought of this package and whether we should pursue it, would they recommend us to do that, do you think, or where are they on this?
I think that in Boston, I think that they would be very positive towards it. You know, I have to do the right preparation, you know, don't go ask them tomorrow, ask me to talk to them first, but I've already talked to them about it. They've sat through these presentations and haven't objected in any way, because they know this is it. The problem is a policy problem. If a town comes up and shows that the water quality has improved, the benthic animal habitat is improved, and the eelgrass habitat is improved, and yet the full implementation of the TMDL has not yet, you know, happened. So let's say you're supposed to remove 1,000 pounds and you removed 750 and it's back. The answer I get 80% of the time is you're done.
You don't what?
You're done.
You're done.
Oh, you're done.
Congratulations, you're done.
The answer I get the other 20% of the time is,
Exit.
well, but if you meet the TMDL, you're done. And my thing is, I'm trying, as we always have, to get ahead of the curve to save the community some money and say, but if you don't have to do the last 20%. But I understand DP's point of view, and I actually agree with it too. They're saying for some towns, if they do their full implementation, that's what they're going to do, then pretty much they're done. But I got a feeling that down the road they're going to have to still, somebody's going to go out and look in the water like it took them 15, 20 years to do in the Chesapeake. When they looked in the water, it was still dirty. So I'm pretty sure that it will require this. We are being encouraged to set up monitoring programs to keep this going. And there have been offers from time to time that we would actually get state support to do it.
Right.
And we've had other offers to try to set up this environmental services center to help actually pay for the towns to do it. So you wouldn't have to even pay for it, but that's down the road.
Steve?
I have a fairly basic question, and I hope I'm not going back into an area that we should never go into ever again. But I want to be certain that I understand. There's all these stations that have been set up, and essentially they've been getting monitored 4 times a year, and you've been collecting data on it. How do we as a community know? I understand you've set the program, but how do we know that the program you've set up, the number of stations, the number of times to be monitored, is the right group?
Because these are the-
Let me finish the question.
this-
Let me finish my question.
Oh, it was so easy at this point.
It wasn't. Really.
I was trying to get in there before you asked the second half.
No, but like, I guess I'm saying, I believe that you've got a good program set up.
It's not my
But if we
program.
wanted to bring ourselves to another level of sort of confidence that we had the right stations and the right sampling program, is there somebody who has looked at everything you've done and said, specifically to these South Coastal estuaries, this is the best way to go at it? Or should we be considering asking somebody to check and say, have you got the right baseline?
Can I answer now?
Yeah.
It's real easy. It is the easiest answer in the universe. These are the stations, these are the protocols that were accepted, reviewed, and accepted as the basis for your TMDL. Doing more stations might be great, and I would be happy about that, but these are the regulatory used data, the regulatory lab, the regulatory methods, the quality assurance plan that we have to follow. We review all data to make sure that it matches this. If it doesn't match these quality assurance and quality control criteria and levels of accuracy, the data is not acceptable for the MEP use. I mean, it's sort of like saying, well, how do we know they're right? Well, in many ways, you never know what's absolutely right, but this is the sampling that validated your TMDL model. These are the concentrations that are in your TMDL. So therefore, comparing a future program to those would give you what you want. And remember, everything's always what you're going to use the data for, but what you're going to use the data for is to say, I made it or I didn't make it. And what are you going to compare it to? Well, you're going to compare it to, did I make the TMDL? TMDL is actually concentration, not so much a load in these systems. So that is all based on these stations sampled 4 times a year over many years. Did I sound forceful?
I could see us being at a certain point and somebody or some entity going, if you did this, you'd get a different number or whatever. I'm just trying to protect us against somebody stepping up
But
later
that's
on.
not, I mean,
But
you
like
could
your
do
answer.
anything and get a different number.
I like your answer.
Well, there's another piece to it, which is that updating the model will require, to do a direct comparison, will require then these same stations, right? Because those are the ones that are in there. The Sentinel station is one of these stations as well, in all cases. So the Sentinel station in each estuary, I think it's like
Are you saying there's only one Sentinel station?
there's check stations and Sentinel stations, but yeah, there's in Little Pond, for instance, it's LP2. That was set up
The
as
Sentinel.
just meaning that if the concentration at that station hits a certain number, then the whole estuary should be restored. So some people have said, well, let's just measure that one. Well, the problem with that is if you do that, and you do it 4 times a year, you got 4 data points, and you got no gradient, you lose a lot of your QA. And this is, again, what has happened in other systems. And now what we have encouraged and has worked over, and this is decades of dealing with this stuff, what has worked is if you want to reduce your program costs, cut the number of dates. Don't cut the number of stations, because the power you lose with the number of stations is horrible. Because what we do is we can pool dates over time. If you're trying to say within this interval of 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, you can get back some of your dates, because they were doing 8 samples a summer.
Oh, okay.
So say cut it to 4.
Okay, your
And
4 is
so
your
no, we
minimum.
want to do it 8, but we want to cut the number of stations in half. But then our ability to look at gradients, our ability to recalibrate models, our ability to look at trends, like there was a big trend analysis done in Pleasant Bay by the Cadmus group, and they can only do the trend analysis on the individual stations that have all the data, not the ones that went ... and nothing. And unfortunately, what they found was the ones they really are interested in, as always, were the ones that went ... nothing. And it's nobody's fault. In fact, that's a fantastic program run by the Pleasant Bay Alliance in the town of Chatham.
Now, we have 14 estuaries that are going to be studied when the program's over. You have this continuous line of data for all of them? You said Falmouth Harbor.
No,
maybe not.
there's
How
a
about the other?
couple that I mean, we wish in many ways that we had more stations in some of the Buzzards Bay ones,
Oh,
right?
like
Because
Quistit.
like Quistit has 2 stations in it,
Okay.
But if you look at like the one, West Falmouth Harbor is one that we do. This is West Falmouth Harbor. We do it with the partnership with the Bay Watchers is that they help us collect some of the samples. Some of them are our volunteers. We run all the samples and give them the data. But so you see there's a lot of stations up in here, but it hits each of the main basin, and this is the Sentinel station for, I think, or it's this one. No, I think it's this one for West Falmouth Harbor. But you need a lot of stations. You can't get away with 2 stations or 3 stations. You need a lot of stations.
So which estuaries do you have a missing data set? Yeah.
The ones that were the weakest were originally were Salt Pond and Falmouth Inner Harbor. But what happened was that years ago, when we were working with the town on 14, getting 14 estuaries moving along, that we had good data for most of the south-facing ones, for Coit, for most of the ones in Buzzard. Everything was looking pretty good, and then we realized that if things went along the way they did, that we would have to have a 3-year baseline monitoring for Salt Pond and Falmouth Inner Harbor that wouldn't exist at the time the town said we want you to give us the report. So we set up a program that's run actually by staff, and we ran that for a number of years, and all that data went into the MEP report. So, and I think Salt Pond's not done yet, so that's continuing, but for Falmouth Inner Harbor, since it's run by staff, the cost implications are greater, so.
I just wondered, so it's been over the last 15 years or
30.
Or 20 years, actually, or 20 years. Now, have you seen any, maybe not in Falmouth, but elsewhere, that sea level rise has affected any of these systems in a way that would
No. In many ways, sea level rise is occurring, but in a bit of it's a misnomer right now. It's still only rising at about 3 millimeters a year, so in 20 years, what are you seeing? 60 millimeters, 6 centimeters, 2.5 inches or whatever. I mean, but that was also the rate that we were getting when the very first EPA report came out that sea level rise could go to 1.5 meters a century. we all ran around and wrote proposals to NOAA, and that was in the early 80s. And since then, sea level rise in this region has not increased so much as to make any difference over the long-term historic trend. Does that mean that sea level rise isn't occurring? No, it's been occurring in this region for 18,000 years. It's a lot slower now than it was 18,000 years ago, but it's still been occurring, and it may accelerate to something, but we haven't seen that acceleration, so therefore we haven't seen the impact.
What about rainfall? Is it pretty stable?
Yeah, when we look at rainfall, we look at long-term trends because the MEP is a recharge-based model for the watershed. We have to know so in order to know the recharge, you know the rainfall. And so whereas there are patterns of rainfall around the region, there's no big changes in rainfall at this point. We do get interannual differences. I mean, you know that.
Yeah, sure.
And we can track a lot of that based on the long-term well records that we have access to that data.
Can you just describe briefly who's doing what in West Falmouth Harbor? Bay watchers and pond watchers are both doing something.
The town of Falmouth asked us to start working in West Falmouth Harbor before the plume got there in 92 or something like that. 91, 92, I can't remember, but like 92. So we set up a program as part of Pond Watch in West Falmouth Harbor. We've continued that program till today. The same cost, everything is done the same way. It's run by us, but we get some help from Tony Williams as well. That's all.
And Bay watchers, what are they doing? What are the Bay watchers doing?
It's a very similar program to Falmouth Pond Watch, but it's run differently. When it was set up, it went from no estuaries to 28 estuaries in one season. So to set that up, there were no boats were not part of it, although they use the Bay Watcher boat to collect nutrient samples sometimes in some of the big estuaries. It's a big improvement in the last couple of years, but it's different. And their auction measurements are made early in the morning, but at any tide, and they're surface water samples.
Only surface.
Near shore, from shore.
Okay, big difference.
Or from
They're not using your sentinel stations or anything else. They're using onshore collection.
No, they're doing water quality monitoring, and it's a powerful program. I mean, it's something that you want to see happen, but it's a different thing. I mean, it's a different animal.
So they're not using any of your sites or...
No, the program, we helped set the program up. Remember, we ran it for decades. So what happened is that we still exchange data with them and everything. And we use their data very generously, still gets used for the MEP and everything. The only difference is that we're not running the assays in the last couple of years. For a couple of years. We'll see what happens.
That's a problem.
No, I think that they're doing fine.
They're being done at the MBL, right?
Okay.
The problem that we have in analytical work is it's just such a pain to do regulatory samples. Because when I was just doing pure basic research, the analyses that you do are fine, they're good, they're accurate, they're great. The 20% or 25% more work in dupes and blinds and field blanks and all the stuff that you have to do for regulatory work adds cost, but to a researcher frequently no value. So a lot of research labs then don't do it. When I was at Hui, I didn't either. I did dupes, I did all that stuff, and I did matrix spikes occasionally, but not running, performance evaluation samples, blind, doing laboratory intercalibration, all of this junk that costs really 20-25% of the cost of a sample, but it doesn't produce another data point until it's, yes, Your Honor, we did do that, and no, really, the town of Falmouth has met its TMDL for West Falmouth Harbor, and that's where the value comes all back to you.
Seems to me all this complaining about regulatory compliance makes you sound like a Tea Party member.
Actually, I'm not. If you think this is complaining, this is me trying to hide the fact that we've come this far, we do this stuff, and that I'm talking to people that are talking about actually doing something. That makes me happy.
Okay, any more questions, Virginia?
We wouldn't have to do compliance monitoring until we've actually taken some steps that we think have reduced loading, right? We can continue with the pattern that you have now. We might want to beef it up a little bit in particular areas if there's something else we're interested in, supplement.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't have to change what you're calling the basic structure.
No.
until.
I agree with that 100%.
Okay, so that, which says to me that that's
Right.
probably a couple years out.
Yeah, that's my lack of clarity. I mean, really, this low-level baseline is what you need to do now. You need to do it, though, and not stop, because it's hard to get it started.
Right.
But the other piece isn't that. The other piece is that things do change in estuaries. We do see
Sure.
things happen.
Right.
And I show one I had one here just from, this is oyster pond, salt levels in oyster pond, just, a couple samples here and there over a long period of time. And when oyster pond, way back when, was, oh my God, it's the end of the world, it's dead, it's what's happened, it's nutrients, it's sunspots, it's whatever it is, what it really was in here that nobody knew, somebody had opened the culvert and let all this salt water in and it killed everything. And so it's those little things that save you your problems. I have other, zillion examples, but here's a good one from Falmouth. So, a low-level check is a good thing. I wouldn't be out there doing anything on, eelgrass bioassays or anything.
Is that when they did the oyster stuff? The oysters wouldn't grow for some reason.
Right.
Yeah, but that could be actually a species problem of phytoplankton, and also the salt levels in oyster pond are typically, you try to keep it between 2 and 4 parts per thousand. So they're very fresh, brackish, slightly.
You mentioned you had a contract with the town of Falmouth for West Falmouth Harbor since 1992.
Well, no, I mean, it ended in, I don't know, when I went to the university. So.
But you have some kind of a contractual relationship with the town now?
For MEP work, yeah.
Okay, and presumably the CWMP that...
And scenarios,
Okay.
for you guys.
Right. So if we wanted to pursue in the directions we've all been talking about pursuing here, we already have a contractual relationship, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and we have for a long time. I think we've
Fine.
had almost nearly continuous contracting for more than 10 years.
I'll rephrase his question and say,
My translator.
if we want to see the analysis for the baseline data that you've collected since 2005 up to the present, would we be able to amend your contract to have that work done so that we can see what the trends are?
Yeah, and I recommend that. I mean, we've been trying to get this stuff out for a while, but I would say that we probably wouldn't be able to get to it until the fall.
Okay,
Just because it's a new thing, we're in the middle of the summer season.
okay, yep, fair enough.
And you understand.
All right.
That's lightning speed for
Yes,
us, don't
right.
worry.
Well, and
I didn't say it would be done in the fall. We'll start in the fall.
All right, we'll start in
Make
the
a
fall.
motion.
Okay, and we can feel comfortable with the fact that you actually will be out there monitoring this summer, or this season, this year.
Yeah, although we are hoping at some point that the town starts picking this up, because at some point
Yep.
we're just going to run out of steam.
Okay, but if you get paid to do the monitoring, this,
We'll get it done this summer.
oh, okay. Thank you.
The fear is what will happen in 2 years.
Okay, well,
We're good.
As
The
I'm,
EC meeting next summer.
as I'm sitting here listening to all this, I don't think it quite dawned until I sat here what a debt of gratitude we as the community owe to all of the people that have been pond watchers
Well, that's right.
for spending their time, using their
Yes.
boats, and
Yes.
getting involved with this, and participating in collecting what turns out to be an almost invaluable set of data. So
Right.
I would like to make a motion that this board formally recognize their appreciation for the pond watchers and what they're doing.
Yeah, Send Dale a letter and she'll send it out to them individually.
That would be
All
great,
right.
That would be
yeah.
very
Yeah.
All
nice.
right,
Yeah,
any
we should
discussion
do
on
that.
that?
No,
No.
All in favor?
Yeah,
Aye.
okay.
Thank you.
But a separate question. It seems to me that the one element with time urgency to it is getting together this group to decide where to monitor around the shellfish this summer.
No,
Well-
we're not,
Not this year.
we're not putting
this
enough
year.
shellfish into, we're just gonna measure that shellfish grow. We're gonna,
Right, so it's not this year.
But I think we're going to need a baseline data, because we expect if the shellfish goes forward, that it would start sometime around now, next year. So we would need some data, a system in place, whether it's these points are adequate, or we need like samples taken around the oyster operation, the demonstration when it's going, and then maybe halfway between there and some of the other points you're measuring, or
Ron,
Before
just time out.
Yeah.
In the scope of work
yeah.
that we're putting out,
Pardon me.
we have a task in there for somebody to look at what the sampling plan and data collection should be, to
Right.
get this back to us around the December time period,
Yeah.
And that should be enough time to integrate what we're doing next
Yeah.
summer.
But
what
you
I-
need before data from this summer.
He said they're going to gather it anyways.
What I would
Yeah,
say
yeah.
is
Some
that
points, yeah.
it doesn't hurt to have a preliminary meeting, get the people together, and start the process, even if the next meeting is 5 months hence.
Right.
Just in case, because you don't want to lose a year. So I don't know how that affects your schedule, if that messes you up, but it doesn't hurt, and we would be willing to attend that. So.
Whomever we retain to work on the shellfish issue will probably
Yeah.
want to meet with you at some point before
Yeah,
they
no, that's
deliver a
great.
report to us.
Great. Any further comments or questions from the committee or the public? Mr. Finneran?
This isn't quite along the lines of this, but you're here, I might as well ask you. I was talking to someone and they don't have any confidence in any of this. You know what I mean? They think that we're quite far away from the bullseye. And they asked me, and I couldn't answer this, if all this is true, how come none of the nitrogen is in the well water?
First of all, some of the wells on the Cape are becoming contaminated. One of the reasons early studies mapped residential home density versus nitrogen concentrations in wells. So first of all, that's just not right. Some of the other wells are very deep and their position. We have wellhead protection district. All that water district land that the town pays all that money, that's to protect the well from getting contaminated. The second thing that I would ask you is, where'd the eelgrass go? How come everybody comes up to me and says, I used to be able to walk out in the water and see my feet, I can't see them anymore? And how come we have fish kills in several of the south-facing estuaries every year or so than we didn't used to?
Oh, I understand all that.
Well, no, ask your friend that.
No, I got
The other question that, it seemed a good question to me. How come there isn't, especially in some of these residential wells, there just
This is a
doesn't
Mike
seem to
McGrath
be a great
specialty.
deal of nitrogen.
The short answer to that is that there aren't residential wells where there is a high density of houses. The areas that have residential wells are low-density areas.
And that was a town decision.
That was a town decision. That's why we went to 2-acre zoning in the Hatchville area.
The town put in town water and all that.
I want to just make sure that we've had clarity on one other piece that I hear just sort of in the general man in the street. And that is, if we do something special just around the Sentinel station so that it meets the TMDL, we're done. So you need to say clearly why that's not a true
Was our
statement.
idea.
The Sentinel station is something to try to make things easier to understand and for people. But don't anybody ever make a mistake that they think that if you can sort of trick the system, that's going to get by. The bottom line is the TMDL is to restore the eelgrass habitat and the animal habitat. However you do that. If you can do something around the Sentinel station that will restore all the benthic habitat in Little Pond and whatever the historic eelgrass was, which is about a third of the way up the pond, then you're there.
Okay, thank you.
Matt?
You've been working with the Mashpee,
Wampanoags.
Wampanoags
And the
on
town.
their shellfish program. Can you just give us some observations about that?
The problem has been with that is not that it's not a success, it's actually one of my favorite stories. So it's been a really good program. The tribe has really stepped up to the plate and they've been very good. In fact, you guys, for this, those are the stations in Eel River and in Wacoit. All of these red stations, and they're done with the town, the tribe, and us. We signed an MOU 4 years ago now to continue this project into the distant future as part of the restoration planning for these systems, and also building on to it things like some of the lake restoration. The oysters. Now, the oysters, they have some really good stuff. First, the tribe is starting to expand out in aquaculture within the bays, but the town started in the Mashpee River, which is the ultimately good place to put oysters for growing them, protecting them from disease, and for removing nitrogen. So in many ways, that's been a tremendous success, but they have to get enough oysters in there. And that's what that's always the holdup. Okay, we got 1 million, now we got to get 3, now we got to get 5, so they can really see the effect. And some of the early problems we have, because we were out doing some really sophisticated measurements trying to better quantify the nitrogen removal, because that's what we want to do. But it was very difficult with the way they established the original aquaculture setups, which has since been changed. And that's not a criticism. They did it because they worked, and that was a good thing. We came in afterwards to quantify it. So one of the things that I would hope to do with meeting with these guys is say, can we set it up so it removes nitrogen, grows oysters, but it also is ideal for quantification of the impact. That was something they haven't done, but they're very willing to do it. I'm very happy with that.
So when the EPA's merit award,
Yeah.
the program, but you still haven't really nailed down the nitrogen removal.
Well, we know the minimum removal. You know, I mean, we know sort of like what you have to give them credit for, but we want to magnify that a couple 100% to get more of the true number.
Now, taking this back to Virginia's question, if, for example, they're telling me they want to put 10 million oysters in there to get the TMDL, to meet the TMDL, would that be the Sentinel station that they're trying to?
No, well, I mean, everybody shoots at the Sentinel station because it's easy. Like I said, it's a working tool kind of thing. But ultimately, it will be what happens. If they do it in the MASH in Pompanesett Bay, it will work. In Wacoit, there's like 4 or 5 different stations you have to hit it at that are pointed out. I mean, you can't expect to do a Sentinel station in the main body of Wacoit Bay and think you can predict what's going on in Mayhew Pond. It doesn't happen. But 10 million oysters is a lot. It will have a significant impact. The question is, somebody had said, I think, that they thought that would be sufficient to meet the TMDL. I'm not sure that that's the case because the amount of nitrogen overload in Pompanesett Bay is virtually second to none. It's one of the most heavily impaired, and so is Wacoit, heavily impaired by nutrients of any of the systems. And before you said that, the other answer to your question that I forgot was those stations are the stations, the data from those stations was the data that put those estuaries on the 303D list, on the EPA's list of impaired waters. In order to do that, you have to go through a whole bunch of rigmarole in terms of the quality of the data, and normal volunteer monitoring data is not accepted on its own for that analysis. You need other data, and that we had that. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Have you been in contact with the person with the people who are doing the private oysters in Charles River? They put in a lot of oysters in there.
Yeah, but we haven't. I know in the Sea Pit River. Or is this
in
a new?
Sea Pit River.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, even before the people that are doing it now, Olin Kelly was there years and years ago, and his daughter now is doing stuff, and now new companies come in, and I know that they're changing and trying to increase. I think that at the point they increase the Sea Pit River is one of those places you think would be ideal to quantify, but the water flow through there is so much it's not clear we're going to be able to see a drop in the nitrogen concentration. If the water moves slower, we could really nail it.
Yeah.
But we're going to look.
Us and Lesson has tried to work out a way of figuring out how you could test that.
Yeah, no, that's one of the things that, and there's a lot more oysters in there because the way they use it for a variety of sites. I still remember going out there in a boat and looking at the bottom and seeing these squares of shellfish and going, can I just?
I've lived on Wacoit Bay for many years. I don't know whether your data go back far enough to say whether there was any effect of Bob and the opening of Bob.
Hurricane Bob affected most of the south-facing estuaries in Falmouth in a positive way. What happened, it wasn't a rainfall storm, as you remember. It was August '91, I think.
Yeah.
And it came in, but it had a big surge, and so the surge pushed all this water in the estuaries, and then it all went out at once, and it scoured the inlets. So Green Pond, Great Pond, to name the two that stick in my mind, and the next year you could see it was like a free dredging project. You could see the water quality was improved, but then they sediment back in again.
How many years did that continue? The opening.
It only continued a year or two because it was just a small scour. But it was good. I mean, it showed that, you break the occlusion. That was one of our first evidences. If you break the...
So we need a Category 3 storm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Every 2 years.
Good idea.
Or we can use a dredge.
Order it up. We can do that. Yeah, Brian, thank you very much for your time.
Yep.
I think we all know as much as we need to know about the topic at hand. This is very helpful, and we'll be in touch with a more specific request, I think, in terms of where we want to go with this.
I would appreciate it if the town recognized the pond watchers.
We will.
We will do
It
that.
would make me really happy. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Agenda item number 2, amended draft road runoff RFP. Did everybody receive it in their,
The 22-pager,
yes,
Yes.
it was.
Little Pond Stormwater Management.
Right. There were only 2 pages that really had any of our input on it. Section 0220. Virginia and Steve took notes and have come back with, I guess, a request for clarification a little bit on this one. I thought this would be the easiest RFP of all, but it wasn't. So do you want to
Well,
bring up the concerns you had?
I think the original draft that you saw contemplated just the stormwater discharges to Little Pond, which is the lower Little Pond watershed. But the discussion of the committee ended up saying we should be looking at all stormwater issues for the entire watershed for Little Pond. So this was recast to state that. So the background was changed slightly. And then when you go to the special conditions, that's where we sort of went through line by line special conditions, section 0220. And you see there, at least mine's in red. And we went, if you remember, we went through it more or less line by line. Edited it, and so I simply typed it up as the committee stated. So I don't have any further questions. This clearly now deals with the whole watershed. It is to collect all of the existing information, and where it does not exist, to develop it for all stormwater structures throughout the Little Pond watershed, and then to define what kinds of concepts or projects could be used to intercept that stormwater so that it doesn't get into Little Pond or is routed through a pipe somewhere else, as, for instance, we hear some of it actually goes into the inner harbor. So this will come. This is hiring an engineer to look at this issue.
I think that the conversation got mixed up in that people didn't know until that night, I guess, that a fair amount of the water that theoretically goes to the Little Pond watershed into Little Pond does not, in fact, go to Little Pond. And why it should be included in a study that the town meeting asked us to do of road runoff remediation for Little Pond escapes my
Nobody
my
knew.
mind. No,
You know, knowledge is cumulative. No one knew that some of the stormwater is collected and put into a storm
Yeah.
drain that goes into Falmouth Inner Harbor.
I mean,
So that, you basically need to know what we've got, know what our problem is. So I think that the funding, even though it was originally directed to the 4 discharges, really is going to look at stormwater discharge as a topic.
I don't think there's any inconsistency actually at all, because it's the Little Pond watershed basically, and now we're breaking out
Yes.
what we need to be concerned about. So I think it's consistent. We look at the whole watershed and then find out really what impacts Little Pond versus how it goes into other.
I agree with you. I don't see any inconsistency at all.
okay, well then, as amended, or as...
As presented.
As presented by Virginia. Any further conversation? Okay, we're going to take a vote on adopting this. All in favor?
Aye.
Do you want a motion?
You want-
Okay, let's have a motion.
I move approval of that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I second it.
Fine.
I second it.
Any further conversation? Anything from the public? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No. All right, we got it.
And then, as we remember, the next step is that this gets forwarded to the selectmen for their approval to
Right.
begin the RFP process for an engineering firm.
Number 3, discussion on engineering services RFP. Virginia and Steve and I met with the DPW director, a week and a half ago,
Yeah.
and this subject came up, and we have a report.
Well, do you want to give the report or?
That's Steve Layton, just for
Sorry,
clarity.
Steve Layton.
Right. Ray Jack basically offered to develop the request for proposals for an engineering firm, rather than us use Mike Domenica and begin to assemble pieces. Ray has developed a scope of work for that twice in the past, in 1998, and then again, I think in 2003 or somewhere in that time frame. I think that would speed up the process. I think that because Ray has so much experience in water and wastewater, both here in Falmouth and in former employment, that he would be very knowledgeable. And I think rather than us try and reinvent the wheel and try to put something together as lay people, it was a very generous offer on his part to develop the RFP. That's what the gist of what he said at this meeting.
I think, I mean, based on what you said about his background, his experience and everything, I think it's great. But it would be possible for him to come to us to give us just kind of a preliminary view on what he envisions being in the RFP before he actually sits down to draft the document, so we can sort of, because it's ultimately going to come back to us to endorse or not. And it would be good to be sure that we're on the same page early on.
His point was that we need engineering services for the various kinds of projects that we're looking at, whether it's the design of a permeable reactive barrier or design of inlet widening or design of sewers, and that he would certainly want, let's call it, input. So I see it as a two-way street, I think is what I'm trying to say to you. I don't know, inviting him to one of these meetings, whether that's the function.
How about if we asked him to do up a preliminary draft and then bring it in himself, come and we can ask him why this is in or not in or what thing, but have something to react to rather than just have a conversation.
Yeah, I think
I
that's...
agree with that.
Yeah.
I think otherwise it would be too unfocused.
Right.
We'd be discussing all sorts of general things, as if we were interviewing him to be a member of the Supreme Court or something. Rather focus it on an actual. No, I'm not saying you would do that, but I could see it happening. If there's an actual RFP, we could look at that and say it's fine, or maybe we should change it.
Is that all right?
Well, I mean, I just wonder if we should give him some direction on on what he's going to be putting together, and then we confirm that our understandings are correct when we see the document. That would be my sense. I mean, if he brings something to us, it gets to be reactive and not proactive. We could be more proactive, I think, if we are looking at the...
Well, what if anyone on the committee wants to write something up to give him ahead of time? They do that.
We've done that before.
I would make it even more specific for next June 7th meeting. Could whatever committee member feels are the engineering needs that we want to see in this RFP, send it to Eric, and it's compiled for the meeting. Then that's our input.
I know, but I'd rather rely on his expertise to an extent. I mean, and then we add to it.
The chicken and the egg
Can't
here.
have it both ways.
No, I know. That's what I say, is that we have him come, talk about what he would like to see in it, and then we react to that, and or suggest things, and then he has time to prepare it as we with our input.
There is also a time element here, which is we're trying to get something out. We have RFPs, which we're getting close to the end of having our list of RFPs out. This would extend us into August, I suspect, because we have a couple of meetings already spoken for other things. It just seems like we've got a man who's offered to do an RFP, and we have unlimited review power once he's done that. It seems like that should be enough.
So you've interviewed him already?
Interviewed.
Well,
He's
we
done interviews
went
with
to
an
meet
offer.
with him, we didn't know he was going to make this offer.
I see. And what did he say? Anything specifically of it, in the
What he said
context?
was that it sounded to him like the projects that we have contemplated at this point are specific enough that a request for proposals for engineering services for A, B, and C could be written very clearly, and that he would be willing to do that.
I mean, the general element would be, you know, your firm's experience with preparing documents to comply with the Massachusetts filed subbid law.
right, yeah.
You know, things like that. I don't know that it's, I mean, when we get the first draft from, to the extent that there are elements of that that we want to review, but I mean, my sense is it's not, if Ray's already in the past gone out to solicit engineering services, whether it's for somebody to design the water plant, or to design a bridge, or to design a pump station, or to design culverts, or to design drains, or to design a replacement pipe, you know, the things say the scope of work that we want you to do engineering for is one part of it, but there's an awful lot of other stuff that says, you know, your experience, the size of your firm, you know, having
Oh, no, I know
like
that.
structural engineering and all that
Yeah,
stuff. So
yeah.
I believe what he's trying to do is put together something that covers a lot of that type of stuff. And then the projects are things that we will be helping to identify to him when we get it to review. Is that a fair statement? Or not? I don't know what you guys talked about.
I think it's a fair statement. We put it on the agenda tonight because we'd had this conversation. So it's really not on the agenda specifically for a vote. It was to get a sense of the
discussion,
committee. And, you know, we can go back to him and say, you know, conversation first. But I do agree with Steve Layton that it makes more sense for him to have drafted something, let's say, based on the information we've given him to date, and then so that we have something to react to.
Well, so,
What are you worried about?
oh, no, I'm not worried.
Okay.
I'm not worried about, what I just wanted to be sure is that he doesn't have to go back, you know, he doesn't get frustrated because we come back with some other things. But, within it, would there be topics like, we have GHD doing some preliminary sewer analysis. Would we have a preliminary decentralized approach analysis? Would we have a preliminary outfall potential analysis? Would we have these kinds of things that he would be, we'd be suggesting that he look at, or land application, or whatever these things are that we would like, whatever firm picks it up would have that expertise to look at these items. And so that's the kind of feedback I'd like him to have, so that he knows really where we're coming from. I mean, even if it's to the point of, what does it take to retrofit a house for an eco-toilet? I mean, I don't know if we go, but what I mean is that there could be, depending on different aspects, just so that he gets a sense, so that when he writes this thing, he's got that range. I mean, he does have this Article 17 list, clearly.
Yes, he pointed it up.
So it's more that we just sort of highlight things, but there's some things that are not on there, like the outfall thing, it's not on there, or things like this are not on there, or land application issues are not on there. So just to let him know. I mean, maybe all these are in his mind already. I don't know.
I think they probably are.
Yeah, there's no one who is. He's extremely well aware of all the issues that you've raised. They've been on his plate for a long time. I don't think he's going to produce any surprises, or I don't think it's anything we're going to tell him he didn't know. It'll be a matter of emphasis, but until he's put something together, I think it's we can wait for that.
I heard a suggestion earlier that between now and the meeting on the 7th, to the extent we think there are engineering items that Ray should be aware of, this committee's got some interest in,
Right.
that we convey that to him, so that as he's preparing a draft RFP for us to look at, he'll have some topics that are of value to this committee. I feel comfortable between now and a week from now of maybe writing down some things I think would fall under engineering and passing them back to you, Eric, that could be then fed to Ray, and then Ray would have a draft that could be distributed, and we could then probably have a meeting with, if Ray wants to come in and present how he incorporated those ideas and feelings. I don't know. Does that work?
Does that work?
Yeah.
When?
I just wanted to ask, what's the time frame on this? In other words, is he going to be coming back on the 7th with a?
Oh, I don't think so.
So we have time to do that.
How long does it take to write an RFP?
Yes.
Well,
Right, no, I said the 7th because our big picture timeline shows us needing to move on this promptly, because it is normally a 4-month or 5-month process if you're selecting an engineering firm. And for the purposes of the newspaper and the audience, the reason we are discussing engineering firms is that the contract with GHD was to develop the draft comprehensive wastewater management plan and have it submitted to the state, and then there'll be comments, and then there'll be a final. And so the contract with GHD is nearing its end. So normally, communities, towns, water districts go out again to look for engineering firms when they get to the implementation stage, and that's where we're getting towards in its implementation in its many forms. And so that's why we're again reviewing all engineering firms that would have, and expertise is going to be, and breadth is going to be those two key words.
I'm going to pick up on one thing that Ron said. For example, would he define, would you define, would an engineer define some of the tasks which we have written into the RFP?
Your RFP.
Our RFP. Would they be engineering tasks? And would they be appropriate to include as part of those tasks? In other words, I think there may be. I'd like to question somebody about that. I'd like to think about it, because that would mean something about what we left in our RFP and what were included in his RFP.
Yeah, we sure don't want any overlap.
We don't want to duplicate things. And Ron's suggestion, the design of systems, if there's a need for that, we've already included some wording connected with that, and it might be worthwhile at least going over that wording and making sure that.
Well, maybe you could include that in a memo to him along
Yes, exactly.
before the 7th.
I can just try to articulate. The permeably reactive barrier RFP is asking for a person to come in and do some sort of next level of analysis to try to identify an optimum locations for doing a demonstration project. What it doesn't say is somebody needs to prepare a set of bid documents, establish how you're going to pay for whatever work goes on, measure, install, monitor, shop drawings, all of that stuff that I would consider to be more engineering related exercises. And I think there's a juncture down the road as we get back feedback from whether it's shell fishing or your eco-toilet work a year from now or any place else, the engineering needs. And so part of the exercise about defining, going out and picking an engineer is how specific we are for what we're selecting them for, and this will be an issue, and how general we are in terms of looking for a firm with a certain range of skills and establishing like a task order type contract where initially we say we know there's 2 or 3 tasks coming up over the next year or so, but we reserve the right to add additional tasks, and we're looking for a firm that, because you can always choose not to order the task and go to another type of firm later if you're not satisfied. But I think Virginia makes a valid point that shortly here we don't have a firm engaged by the town to do engineering work. So for example, if the inlet widening ENF moves at a certain pace, it could be that relatively soon we want somebody who can go out and do borings or whatever else to begin doing the work on the engineering side. That might be a task that would be in the engineering plan to say, we're looking for a firm with expertise or experience or knowledge of developing, bridges and piers.
So,
Sure.
can we make a motion to ask Ray to go forward with this, and in the interim, if somebody has an idea that they want included?
Forward it to me by the 7th, and I'll forward them to Ray.
Right.
Okay, that's a good one. Made and seconded. Comment?
Sounds good to me.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good. Item number 4, discussion and vote on Eco-Toilet RFP. We have good news.
We spent 2.5 hours last night going over the existing RFP and a version of it which I had created the last few days to
Turned into Frankenstein.
it turned into Frankenstein. Well,
No, it didn't.
we reduced the monster a good deal last night. I
Yes,
think.
we did.
We got a lot of things out of it. We have asked Mike to take all of the materials that we did last night, all of the comments we had last night, and put them together with A couple of other things would have come in since, or will be coming in tomorrow. We asked George to write up 2 pieces, which he did, and which I think are excellent. My first thing I saw. I am going to write a couple of things, one of which is I'm going to make a trial at what Mike suggested would be very good to have a chart showing the relationships of various things to one another, make it easier to read. And secondly, we dropped out phase 2 entirely, except for a description of what would be go into phase 2, the kinds of things that would go into phase 2, and how we would approach it. I'm going to try to write something like that can be criticized on next Monday. We will come back to it on Monday. We will see what further revisions need to be made, and I think it's now a doable task to put it forward to you by Thursday.
Terrific.
Anything else?
I guess I would ask in the sense that this has been gestating for a substantial period of time. It would be nice to get it as soon after Monday,
Yes.
so that the committee members aren't staying up late on Wednesday night trying to prepare for Thursday night. So
That's our hope.
Yeah. Our hope is that Monday night we will have only a very few changes that have to be made, that they can be made overnight and given to you on Tuesday. That's our hope. We could give you what he's going to give us on Monday, but is that useful?
No,
No.
you finish your product and then
What
distribute
we're
it.
going to vote on, at least
Yeah.
24
Exactly.
hours in advance,
Yes.
Yeah, you will have it.
preferably 48.
Yeah, it will not be there before Tuesday.
Tuesday would be fine.
Okay. We will do our very best to get it by Tuesday.
Okay. I guess the vote would be to...
No, we don't need a
we don't
vote at all.
To table it,
It's
right?
already been
Table it.
tabled.
Motion to table?
motion, second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Good. Updates.
till June 7th.
Okay. Everybody has received the distribution of the final approved versions of the draft section ES6 and ES7 and the outfall section and the denitrification system section. Did everyone-
Those are as voted on last
Right.
meeting, and they're for information, correct?
Okay,
And that was my understanding
That-
of, that we voted on them last meeting,
right?
and they got, requested changes got edited in, and now
Yep.
it's distributed.
Okay.
I just, if I could just, in reading through them again, I had a couple of things that are not really, some of them are as I sent you the notes on that. And some of them are just basically relatively minor changes in wording or whatever. And but the one thing that I thought was substantial with regard to, particularly substantial with regard to ES7, is that it says that in there that the Ocean Sanctuaries Act needs to be changed.
Where are we saying that?
In the I
Yeah.
don't have ES7 in front of me right now, but but there's a point in there that says that it's under ES 7.4.
Okay.
And it's concerning discharge options. And it's sort of like at the end of that section. And in it, it states that the Ocean Sanctuaries Act would need to be changed in order to allow for ocean outfall.
Right. Which is true.
Okay. But if you look at section 510 of the Ocean Sanctuaries Act,
Yes?
it says very specifically that if there's no other option and the justification can be indicated, you can apply to DEP.
Right. But we've,
For-
just,
Yeah.
maybe you weren't at these meetings, but we've covered this exact specific topic 3 different times.
Okay.
Okay? There was actually a workshop conducted by Cooperman and Page, a noted attorney firm out of the Boston area. There's never been a waiver granted. It's unlikely that a waiver would ever be issued, the way the law is written currently. And therefore, the conclusion was that while the waiver provision does exist, that the probability and likelihood of success, given the conditions attached to any waiver, is a hill that is a higher hill to climb than getting a change in the law. That was the conclusion that
Right.
came out of all that discussion. So therefore, the write-up that we prepared specifically says that we believe that pursuing an ocean outfall, for lack of a better word, bay outfall or
Right.
sound outfall,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that while the waiver option does exist, that achieving that waiver option, if we weren't as clear right now that we believe that we would need to change the law,
Mm-hmm.
that our probability of success diminishes substantially. So we didn't see why we would not clearly
Yeah.
state our intention if we believe that that's the best way to do to try to get the law changed.
Let me make it even clearer. In the
Yeah.
law,
Yeah,
in the section that's relevant here, it says,
Yeah.
except in the Cape and Islands Ocean Sanctuary and a couple of others, nothing in this act is intended to prohibit municipal wastewater discharge and blah, blah, blah,
Right.
if such discharge is feasible or not. We are in the Cape and Islands Ocean Sanctuary.
right.
We are disallowed even from the variance procedure. There is no way, no how
That we can do
that we
this.
can
So
do
we
it.
can do it.
End of conversation.
Okay, well,
I mean,
okay.
that is what the law says. All the business about variances apply to other places.
Never granted.
Okay, well, the one thing about it that I thought was interesting is that when you look at the table of contents of that act, or was it 302 CMR 5.0 or whatever?
The regulations.
If you look at it, it stops at section 5.9. Okay? So suddenly, I'm now seeing 5.10 that somebody added at some point and didn't even update the table of contents. So I'm trying to factor in, it's pretty clear in that, but but you're saying that as far as this area is concerned, there's no way
Can't be done.
it can't be done.
And DEP agrees with that analysis.
Copeland and Page agrees with that
Right.
analysis.
It's a done deal.
It's a-
Okay.
Okay.
Which brings your technical points, or what we call the secretarial points, I guess.
Yeah.
You're quite right. There's a line here that says, although a variance procedure for ocean outfalls is available in the current act, that is not true.
Okay.
So that should be changed.
Okay.
And a little further on here,
The reference to Ocean Sanctuary Act.
right, it's the Massachusetts Ocean Sanctuaries Act.
Right.
And
Not
not
marine.
Not marine. So
I would suggest those changes can be done by
right.
I'll
by Nate or whatever.
bring that to Nate's
Yeah,
attention,
yeah,
that
you're
there's.
right about
I'm
those.
saying,
Yeah.
it's just, I like to go over things again because sometimes,
Yeah.
you're looking at one
We all need to
area.
be on the same
Yeah.
page, that the waiver, the
Okay.
whole waiver thing is really doesn't exist for us.
All right.
It doesn't exist for us.
It does
Okay.
not exist for us.
Okay.
So for the record, I will contact Nate. I will send him a clean copy with these corrections.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
And you had another comment about rainfall recharge. There is a report on the whole
Right.
Sagamore lens. I
Right.
made a copy and gave it to Steve Layton at one point. If you still have your copy, Steve, and want to hand it back across, I can make a copy for you, which is the basis for the numbers. So you can read that whole report and then see how they came up with all those numbers.
Yeah, no, I found another report too that I started going through, and it was too complicated late last night.
But
So-
there's a very large
Yeah.
report done by the
Right.
USGS.
Right.
It's all about the lens, the water.
No, I
recharge.
assume it. I just assume that
Get you a copy.
when I see it rain here, it seems like most of it goes in the ground. And we get like almost 50 inches, and only 21 inches makes it into the ground actually. So it's sort of,
You're forgetting about
Yeah.
evapotranspiration.
right.
You have to read the
It
whole
is a
report.
large
thing,
number.
okay.
It comes out.
It
Right.
comes out, right.
So
Okay.
If you wouldn't
Yeah.
mind producing the copy I gave you, and we can
It was just-
pass it
yeah.
along. or
This
make
was
another
just a
copy.
question. You're answering the question. I think I can,
Yeah, yeah.
if
Yeah,
it's
no, I just-
a-
There's a source for it.
there is a reference in the document. I was just sort of, it just struck me that it was,
But
okay, but it's
What's
okay,
there
it's
is
fine. I
correct.
wasn't, I was just, okay.
Item B now, scheduling vendors of step STEG vacuum grinder systems. The 21st is what Jerry is aiming at. He's been contacting all these vendors. He's away this week, so we don't have an answer to whether they've all accepted. But the 21st is the meeting when he's proposing to do that. We should do a road trip after that, I would say, after we've heard from these folks.
Flotilla, should we take a flotilla up to the North Shore?
Your boat, my boat,
Yeah.
this would take a
Steve's
few
boat was-
days.
Steve's boat will be in.
Steve's boat,
Our boat will be in too, but we would end up probably in Florida before we got to up there, you know, the way it goes. But the other thing is that just as a side thing, I don't know how much time all this will take up there, but there is the New England
You mentioned-
Biolabs. I sent a note out about that. The
Right.
New England Biolabs solar aquatic greenhouse
Yeah.
system that is a wastewater treatment thing,
Sure.
which might just be an interesting thing to look at. If we, I mean, it may not be that pertinent to where we're going in the, you know, in the next 10 years, but it might be in the
Yeah.
next 20 years.
Fair enough.
So it's 20, you know, it's in Ipswich. I think it's about a 20-minute drive from Gloucester, but.
okay, we'll try to schedule them all. They're reasonably close together. Newburyport's.
Yeah, right.
Pretty close.
Eric, can I say something?
Sure.
I know, I
The
wanna
road
say
trip.
something.
I look forward to the presentations by the experts on the 21st, but I hope the road trip is well enough organized that we actually learn something. I mean, to look at a road and someone says there's a 2-inch diameter plastic pipe under it,
Well,
I don't have to drive up there to
I
learn
agree.
that fact. You know.
wait, no need for that.
I'm not sure exactly what we would see on the, or who we
I
would
think
talk to.
part of it is to talk to the people who run these systems and in these towns and who live with these systems in these towns and hear about the pros and the cons, learn about the costs, learn about what has worked in their experience and what hasn't worked so well in their experience. The vendors will all tell you that their product works terrific. And we can't stop with that.
So we'd be interviewing the facility managers or
Or the head of the DPW in the town or whatever entity is running these things.
All right. That makes sense.
The kind of problems they've run into and the kind of costs that they hadn't thought about. And the premise, you're right, not pipes in the ground, no. We know what they look like.
Level of residential acceptance and things like that.
Right, that kind of thing.
Could I say in conjunction with this, in preparing for all of these various vendors, I found in my files from 1996, there's an organization called National Small Flows Clearinghouse, and they put out a series of information pamphlets for the layman, and this one is alternative sewers, and it gives you a description of what the STEP and STEG are, what a pressure sewer system is, what a small diameter gravity sewer is, and a vacuum sewer. And I thought, even though it's 1996, my read-through is that it's similar to what I've heard more recently. And so I thought I would just make copies for everybody so that you've had them as sort of background. They still are in existence now. They belong to a group called the National Environmental Services Center, and they still put out a newsletter called Pipeline. And they are also interested in constructed wetlands and alternative toilets and things like that. So it sounded like a good organization. It is funded in part by the EPA. Which, as we know, has been looking at alternatives to big pipes.
Any further comments or
You had a
questions?
question
Yes.
On your tour, you might think about looking at a rain garden, because probably somewhere, if you find out where it is, just a
It's one he's talking about, right?
No,
No.
this is like the surface runoff.
Get rid
Oh,
of your
oh, okay.
stormwater
Yeah.
in a more
Okay.
logical way.
And where is it?
Well, we can find out, some towns have done it extensively, and then I just have to find out
All right.
where they are.
Fine, well, if
Because
it's,
that's what Falmouth really should
if
be
it's,
looking at.
if it's in that part of the world, we'll be there.
Well, the presentation that we had here.
That was
Yeah.
about rain
This is
gardens.
Right.
That was rain garden.
Okay.
And I think that's a good, I mean,
Towns that have done it, so.
he has a list of those.
Yeah.
All right,
The University of New
Just
Hampshire's
format
big
it,
on
that'd be
that.
fine.
okay.
But it's definitely in the messages.
Could I
Yeah, sure.
interject with that?
Sure.
I'm passing out, this has specifically to do with rain gardens. This was an article in the Enterprise, April 17th, which folks may not have noticed.
Oh, yeah.
But this is a landscape architect on the Cape who does rain gardens. So in addition to Horsley Witten, it's good for us to know that there are several people in the field.
Right.
Absolutely.
No.
Without catering to the Fifth Estate, I would
away.
say the bulk of the people at this board probably read the Enterprise from cover to cover whenever they get it.
But the problem is
I
that
was away.
there's so many, you were away, so there's so many things to read. So, great job.
Right.
I saw this thing.
We cringe every time we read our own names.
See our picture.
Yeah, it was a particularly big picture of Matt last week.
You're right.
There's several of those. I'd like to have the ones I missed while I was away.
All sorts of things happening.
All right.
It's a hotbed here.
Right, inlet widening, proposed meeting with the Conservation Commission. I think our sense was that we should wait for the state comments on the county's submission, but that having a meeting with the Concom and with the subcontractor for MEP who did the channel opening section of the MEPs would be really useful in terms of having the Concom understand the pros and the cons, particularly the benefits from our point of view of these pond opening ideas, and to get the feedback from the Concom as to the issues that they might see. But we should wait for the state comments, so at least we'll have theirs, and then try to do this in July or whenever we get the comments.
There's a certain amount of lead time needed to schedule anything at the Conservation Commission, and
Right.
so it makes sense for us to at least have discussed it now for a meeting. Supposedly, the comments on Bourne's Pond, well, they should have been out by now, but they said at the latest it would be June. So, tomorrow starts June. So scheduling with the Concom in July, it's not too early for us to be talking about that.
Proposed meeting with Teaticket Association.
Oh, me, okay.
You spoke with them. I could paraphrase what you told me, but I wouldn't try to do that further.
Okay. I actually had contacted the Teaticket Civic Association last fall and met with them at one of their semi-annual meetings. And actually, Jerry was there as well, and Doug Brown was there also as part of it. But I was asked, basically the idea was that I would talk about the shellfish option, and Jerry actually gave an overview of the whole picture at that time, to an extent. And then, so then I went through the concept and that kind of thing, and there was a lot of support from them about shellfish at that time. And Paul Afsa, who's the co-president or co-chair of the Teaticket Civic Association, I'd meant to contact him. He was to the point of saying, he's right on the pond. These people really have a very strong interest in restoring Little Pond. They are really see it as a very high priority in terms of their neighborhood there. And he said that anything he could do with regard to shellfish, basically, including he has a dock. We could use his dock, basically, for access.
Oh, nice.
So he had mentioned that at that time. Now we'll see. I think he's still quite interested. So he invited us to give a small presentation on June 5th at, I think, at 7 o'clock at the Teaticket School. And the idea is to look at that, but he also wanted to get a little more background on how things are moving with Little Pond. And so I would talk, we could present a bit about this work that GHD is doing now in that area for sewer evaluation, as well as looking at other possibilities, basically going through the green list to an extent of options and how things are going. But I could tell in his voice that he is, he was very open about the fact that they really want something to happen quickly.
Right.
And they're waiting, and they're saying, is this still going to happen, kind of? But
Right.
and I just have to reaffirm that, and then talk a bit about this. The main purpose was to really talk about the viability test, and to let them know that was coming, and then if that worked out well, that we would follow with the demonstration of certain scale that we would keep them advised of. And
So this is actually their annual meeting, so it's an opportunity to
Okay.
give them an update.
Do they have us on the agenda for a particular time slot or a time?
He said around 7:30, basically.
Okay.
I think that's what he said. The meeting starts around 7. but I'll get there early and just be available.
Yeah. I know they have, the Teaticket Park is also on the agenda for their annual meeting, so
They have several items.
right, it's,
They may
They
not
did
want
last time
everything
also.
that we have to
Yeah.
tell them.
But I think we need to, I mean, Ron and I have been talking about this a little bit. We need to get our message very concise.
Right.
yes.
It's, let them know what we're doing,
Fine.
touch upon what will be actually happening there over the next couple of weeks out in the pond and how it'll be going on all summer.
Okay.
And make sure that they're aware that we care about them.
Steve?
This is a special opportunity, although could occur later on as well. Would you make any mention of betterments, or would you say that's down the road?
We have not had a conversation around
We
financing.
haven't talked
Right.
about, right, we haven't.
But it might be more in the forefront of their mind than you might think.
If
And
they-
it might be a good time to get some information for ourselves, especially if they're particularly eager. How high will they bid?
It's a question
I guess, so I'll do this. Since it started off by, it's sort of like we had a meeting of the Shellfish Subcommittee, which turned out to just be Ron and myself, who were able to attend that morning. But nevertheless, we did meet, and one of the things we talked about was reaching out to the Teaticket Association, because we are putting some stuff in the pond. We wanted to let them, we thought that was the mechanism to let them know
Right.
about what we're doing this summer.
Right.
So that was sort of how we called them up. They said, that would be great, give us a little update of what you're doing. I would suggest that perhaps it's an opportunity to say, what's the best way for us to engage you at other times during the year? You know, do you want to come to a meeting?
Right.
Should we put you on our agenda some nights, so we can hear more about your
Right.
needs, or whatever, with the full committee, rather than showing up and kind of
That makes
inundating
sense,
them.
yeah.
I mean, that's my sense.
Especially at their annual meeting.
Yeah, that's my sense, yeah.
Yeah, no, but yeah, right. You know, I didn't want to go, it won't be detailed. It was just more like
It's a
saying,
black tie
here's where we're
affair after
moving.
all, you know what I
No.
mean?
It is?
Ron doesn't have a black tie.
Oh dear. I'll send a video then.
There you go.
Yeah, with but anyway, so that would be the idea is just,
Right.
yeah, I approached with one thing and then he said, well, we'd like to know, they probably would like to know a little bit
Yeah,
more.
I'm sure however the meeting breaks up, people will ask us questions.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
That
but
sounds good.
I don't think you want to get into, first of all, we're not ready,
Right.
and it doesn't seem to me to
Yeah.
be the right
And no, it's
venue.
not on the update agenda. I do know as of today that the permit is in hand for viability testing. I spoke with the harbor master. I will be over there tomorrow getting some harbor master permits, and then the question is, I sent out a little email to a couple of people in the committee to work out some of the protocols of how we're gonna manage this, and
Good.
I have a telephone call set up with Chuck next week to find out how he wants us to come back and tell him how we're gonna do it, so. That's in progress.
A couple of other progress reports, or lack thereof. The 31st was the date that GHD was going to produce the estimate for the Little Pond area. I spoke to Nate today. He would like to put them out on Monday. He
Okay.
has numbers, but he wants to make sure they're accurate and whatever. So we'll give him till Monday, and then we'll send it around.
So that'll be on the agenda for the 7th.
That'll be on the agenda for the 7th, but we don't have them today. The RFPs that we're finding, all of them, including the one that talked about our part-time technical person, are on Jerry's desk. And Jerry is away until the 9th. I believe he's away for a while. And nothing happens to them in his absence, so we're a little bit stymied on that. But the man deserves a vacation, and he's taking one, so we can't do anything about it. When?
Does that include the MOA for,
A good question.
It shouldn't,
it shouldn't?
because the MOA is to the selectmen, they're the ones that sign it, it's passed, and it just didn't go to Jerry's desk in the first place. And you remember that we asked George Hoyfelder to check directly.
I would like to ask a question about the ability of the Eco-Toilet Subcommittee to take action to try to find out. Can I go to the town and find
No,
out?
I tell you what.
It would be better not.
He's on vacation. Heather's gone. The only person who's in a position to answer any questions is the town manager, and I suspect his answer will be, wait till these other two come back.
Okay.
You're welcome to you're a citizen, you can go ask about anything you want, but
Sure.
but I think you're going to find the answer is what we're going to find, which is the two people who are responsible for these things are both on vacation at the same time.
So nothing's gonna happen till the middle of June.
But they did not go on vacation together. I just want that to be clear.
We certainly hope not. Right.
Okay.
What else do we have here? Before we get on to the review and the minutes and the correspondence, I want to say something about Virginia Valiala, who has just produced an enormous amount of exceptionally well-written material for our CWMP and for everything else we've been doing lately. And I think she works harder at her retirement job than she ever did on the other job. This is a remarkable amount of stuff. Usually towns pay $200,000 or $300,000 for people to put this kind of material out, and we're obviously producing it for love of the town.
Well, yeah, love
Still
of the
gets
town.
more time in her garden.
Yes, he's right.
But maybe a motion of appreciation.
So moved.
Oh,
Second, all in
And then
favor?
some.
You're very welcome.
Particularly would encourage you to keep up this level of
That's
work.
right. That
Right.
was moved, seconded, and voted. I don't know if you abstained or not, but
I did abstain,
she
yes.
abstained. Everyone else voted for it. Okay, previous minutes. Everybody received them in the email
Yep.
format? Any comments, additions, corrections, or alterations to be recommended? Hearing none, a motion to accept them?
So moved.
So moved.
And seconded? All in favor?
Aye.
I abstain, is that?
You abstained, you weren't
were-
there, right?
Right.
Okay. Correspondence. Do we have any?
None that came across my desk for distribution, unless somebody's walking
All right.
through the.
I already handed mine out.
I didn't have any either.
The only thing is I sent a note, right, to the chair. Right, and
Which
we've
I think
talked about most of
we've
that.
talked about the
Right,
points
I
you
just
raised.
wanted to be, there was just one point on that. In this 4.5, the ocean outfall piece that is being considered for the CWMP, at the end of the second paragraph, I'm not sure if this is one of the editing things that you would be taking out, but it says basically, the ocean sanctuaries were established in the coastal waters of Massachusetts in part to regulate ocean outfalls and in fact to prohibit their use, although a variance procedure for ocean outfalls is available in the current act. Now that's stated here, and it's there, but
Not
maybe
for
there
us.
should be something stated, but it's not applicable to
Right.
our waters
Right,
or
okay.
something
That's
like
true.
that.
That is true.
Because it looks like it's,
You want to just strike it?
I don't know, I thought you had made a suggestion earlier.
That was
This is the other, that was later.
that was in the other document, I think.
Because
That
it's
was- that was
confusing.
ES 6 or 7.
Yeah, I
But we
think the
should get rid-
simplest thing is just to strike that sentence, so the period comes after,
Okay.
and in fact, to prohibit their use.
Right.
What are we actually talking about? Is it
This is the outfall,
further evaluation of an
Yes,
ocean
and
outfall?
just-
4.5.
end
right.
of the second paragraph.
Second paragraph
Right.
starts with a rationale.
Oh, right, yes, oh, I see,
Okay,
okay.
so that line that starts although a variance, blah, blah, blah,
Right.
we're going to strike that.
Yeah,
Yes, and at F at the very end, it actually states that, so you're right, you can't have it both
right,
ways.
right.
Right.
Well, this is where I started to get
Yeah.
a little confused, and I went to the act itself and went through it, and I missed this thing about Cape Cod waters. so-
Right.
But it was late last night when I was doing this, so it was sort
That's
of.
all right, they write those things to confuse you.
Yeah.
No, you go along and it says, yeah, it's a last resort.
Right.
You can apply based on whatever the thing is, so.
Unless you live here.
Unless you live
Unless you
here.
live here. okay.
Yeah, okay.
And the only other thing is and I was talking with Brian earlier, is I've looked at and I can pass these around. This is to do with the monitoring and how the monitoring works relative to the estimates of the TMDL and the water quality. And if we go to the Little Pond report,
Is this, if this is what you passed around earlier, is this something we should put on an agenda, as an agenda item, rather than introduce it now to talk
yeah, we
about all the loadings and the distribution of that?
yeah,
I mean,
we
I'm
could-
just-
I saw the written paragraph you had there, and
Yeah.
I think it's pretty accurate, but is this a sort of elaboration on
I
that?
don't know, I mean, if there's, are you just bringing up what's already in the past reports to make sure we're aware of them? Or what?
Well,
is
it's
there a
just,
point?
it's a little confusing in that the reports say in two different ways. One says that the.
I'm gonna try to
Yeah,
get away. There's nothing
right.
on the agenda about
Right,
this.
right,
Okay,
okay.
well,
So-
on
so
June
what-
7th, we're going to have something on the agenda about Little Pond because Nate's going to come in with his
It's gonna come in with
report.
things. So
All right, okay, well, this
That
fits with
would
that.
fit with that.
if
This
that
fits
fits with
with
that,
that,
then
that's
that's when
fine.
that's the time. to
I
do
have a
it.
suggestion. You pass out so that we at least know what you're talking about, and
Good
we've
idea.
had a chance to look it over.
Yeah, no, I will do that. I forwarded the basic, but I didn't,
Right.
I just
I didn't
copied
That's the
it.
chart, and so,
Yeah, these I have enough for everyone, so you can
Yeah,
look at these.
pass out the chart.
And then there's this other section from the main report, okay, this is from the main report that I just extracted to try, but it's confusing in these two. This seems more straightforward in some ways. It's still not that straightforward.
do you have, but this is an issue that you want to talk about?
This is, yes, this
Okay.
is a point about how we consider and really understand what the interventions that we're considering can do
Right.
and how we can go about it. So I sent a note.
So you want to put onto the agenda?
It'll be, well, the 7th is an appropriate one.
An
'Cause-
an item to talk about what type of process procedures and nitrogen-reducing systems will be developed, analyzed, utilized, and applied to Little Pond?
Not the systems per se, more what needs to actually be done. How much nitrogen needs to be removed per day, that's going in there now per day. And that's what the MEP reports don't talk about, they do talk about specific technology, but they're basically saying, you need to do this.
So you want to review the existing data set. the
Right.
Existing data, provide in the Little Pond report.
Yeah.
So that the entire committee understands where each one of the segmented amounts are. So we know what has to be removed.
Has to be removed, and whether the interventions that we're looking at can do that.
Well, I think we all understand that
Yeah.
no one is going to do it all.
Well, I think that there's under some conception, I think, is that if you intercept all of the, maybe we shouldn't talk about it now, but the septic load, you can reach the TMDL.
I don't think anybody here
Okay,
thinks that.
That's never been established.
Those little charts they put out, it says 100% here, but it says 70% there. We understand you have to do both.
Right, no, I understand that. But what I'm saying is that we have, if you do 100%, all of it,
Right.
you're still not meeting the TMDL,
In your opinion?
according to this.
Okay, we
Yeah.
need to look at that
Yeah.
because someone may come to a different conclusion.
Yeah,
And I think ultimately, we may need to ask Brian
right,
Howes some certain specific questions. It's possible we're looking at a particular number and misinterpreting what the number represents.
right. Well, anyway, the two reports that these are from, sorry, this one,
Yeah.
I didn't, but,
Pass them
Okay,
around,
let's-
Yeah, okay.
just,
let's do that.
and then, but we won't discuss
so
it
here, all right.
until
here,
next time.
Yeah.
Take the two sheet, one of these?
One of each, yeah, one of the, here's the other one, okay. Here, I printed 10, so there's some, there you go.
Okay.
And the sheet that doesn't have a citation on it came from the main report.
The MEP report,
Right, and it's not complete,
2005.
it's not the whole story, so you might want to go there. So,
Right.
Okay, any further business to come before the committee? This is a world's record for us. I think we're getting out before 10:30.
We can find something.
We owe it to the Eco-Toilet Committee.
We do.
Want a copy?
I have a,
No.
We won't be so lucky the next time.
That's right, yes.
I move that we adjourn.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
We got it.